video was originally recorded April 2018 at Tibet House, US in New York City, and is a part of the ongoing Force for Good class series. To learn more, visit tibethouse.us.
The Nagarjuna book. It really is special. You know, I really think so. And, wait, I don't need all of this. I'm going to close everything. I need my Kindle. And you know, I'm sorry that I don't have lots more funds, because this commentary that I've been studying myself, I learned so much from it today, even, you know, and yesterday, you know, in the middle of rushing to leave. I'm leaving very early in the morning, 6 in the morning, for a season in Hawaii, teaching with Baba Ram Das, a.k.a. nay Richard Alpert. He is, so anyway, in the midst of that, I learned so much reading this thing. Where is it now? Where's my Kindle? There it is. This commentary. But you know, I can't ask that everybody buys that and all of you online. Are the people online? But I really have to recommend that book. You can get it on Kindle, and it's not very expensive. And I did recommend it at the beginning. Hello, Kindle, would you like to open? And I know it's not optimized, but it works. Okay, here we are. What's new? I'm not interested in that. You know, the internet is so annoying nowadays. You can almost not do anything before people are trying to sell you things. They're just clawing away at you as if they didn't have enough money. These, now is that showing on the thing? Oh, good. Okay, no, I don't want to jump all the way to there. I wanted to do a few things here. I have to go this way. But, you know, but I just love this book. One verse that particularly grabbed me. You see, the commentary in this version, the translation is done by students of mine, John Dunn and Sarah McClintock, who now are professors here and there. And they did the basic verses. She used mostly what they taught. And but the commentary is a transcription and editing by the wonderful Thupten Chodron, a wonderful Buddhist nun in eastern Washington State. Thank you. Who's really a great writer herself. But she did, and he is wonderful, this Geshe. And I learned so much from him reading this commentary that, and I really wish you could, oh, it came out, even with our new tie, okay. Okay, good. Maybe if we had a piece of tape. Actually, you don't have any gaffer tape by any chance anywhere. I'm mad you come and gaffer tape this and we won't have this constant thing. And anyway, verse of the day. Okay, enough of that. Verse of the day. When, no, Matt, can you do it? You're better to do it. Okay, I'll try to do it. Verse of the day is this. When you hire somebody to do something for you, and especially if it's a really good thing, and then another piece on top, I think one on top. Really do it. Just paper. It's not the vicious kind of. It's really strong gaffer tape. By the way, I have something for you, which I'm going to comment on at some stage. It's the last page of Time magazine, and it's about him. I'm remembering very much your discomfort. So, but I am both seeking to assuage it and maybe increase it. I'm sorry, you know, I don't mean to be, but it's old age, you know. I'm not as naughty as the Dalai Lama yet. He's quite naughty, you know. I won't tell. There's one story that's on the internet. You can find that on YouTube at a conference where he talks about his discomfort in traveling in airplanes when he gets gas and how he handles it. It's beyond belief. I'm not going to go further. No. Anyway, the people are just awestruck, you know, and people are madly laughing, of course, in the thing, but they're just amazed, you know, this holy man. You know, really. Anyway, the verse of the day is, you hire somebody to do something for you. Nagarjuna says, and I forget which number, but I'll probably run into it when I go through things. But I just want to highlight it. Oh, hello. There you are, Shema. No, I'm not Turkey Billion. How are you? How do you say, how are you? What? In Turkish, in Turkish. What?
I'm good, thank you.
How do you say? Behaba? Behaba? Anything else? Okay, Behaba. Turkish has a lot of Sanskrit words, according to scholars. Because the Turks at one time in Central, before they came to Anatolia and became Muslim, they were Buddhist for a while. Then they reverted to shamanism to conquer things. Because you can't really conquer much if you're a Buddhist. You just get conquered, usually. But they have these residual Sanskrit words in their language, according to some philologists. Anyway, the verse of the day, so you hire them and do something, it's a nice thing, you get merit, that's wonderful, and your employee is nice, and it's really nice. But you meet a beggar on the street, even any kind of beggar or anywhere, and then you have no reason to give any money to that beggar, and they're not going to do anything for you, and you worry about maybe it's not good for them to have it, and we have all these things when we see beggars. But actually, if you give them something anyway, it's doing you the greater service by far than someone you can hire to do something for you, because the only reason you would give them is generosity. You let go of what you had and you gave it to them. That's the only reason. Because, you know, that you calculate they're going to do something, or they're going to go have a meal instead of more crack, or whatever it is. That's all irrelevant. Basically, you still only give it out of generosity. Therefore, that beggar is your opportunity of developing true generosity, and in your future life, you're going to be massively wealthy. So the beggar is doing you a huge favor by being in your path there and giving you this chance to, even if whatever it is, a quarter, $1. When I read that verse, then I lost all my bills in my pocket. I didn't go in the back hip pocket because I have money to travel, but I lost it all. There's plenty of them up on Broadway and 110th Street. But I just think that's so marvelous that that person there is in your way, karmically, and giving you this opportunity to be pure generosity and to give them $1 or a quarter or whatever it is, $5. And actually, I love giving them. I can't really, but occasionally I do. I give like a 20, and it's, the expression on the face is so like, they're really cool. Some of them are very cool, like whatever, you know. But sometimes you get a happiness reaction that's really lovely. Okay, so we sort of stopped around here, and in the end of the 300 to 400, the third century of verses, and where he kind of unpacks that. He talks about how Mahayana is the Buddha's teaching, and he makes reasons why it has to be. And the Geshe has some very good things to say about it. And he says, I like this very much because I always argue that the Prasangikas, among the different philosophical views in the Mahayana, Only the Prasangikas are the ones who really like the fundamental, he calls it here fundamental vehicle, but I call it individual vehicle. You know, some people translate lower vehicle or lesser vehicle, you know, the Pali tradition, and also there's a Chinese version, which are not the ones in Sri Lanka, called Mahasangika. There were 18 different schools of them, basically monastic ones, and basically a kind of dualistic version of Buddhism, where they cater to all of our escapism that we all have, we have to recognize, which is that we just want to get out of the mess. We do. Somewhere we really do. Like, and every night, we're so happy to be unconscious. We really are like, forget about it. All the pressure, you know, all the demands and all the duties and all the things going wrong and all this. We're so happy. So much of so-called spiritual practice is aimed at escaping the world. And even people think, therefore the Bodhisattva is crazy in our culture. And the nirvana is definitely not here. I mean, that's what so many people think who are Buddhists. And even Buddha taught many people that way. You know, you get out of birth, no more birth, no more, you've done what has to be done. They always say that. No more birth, and you're finished. You have no more unpleasant life. And of course, some Western people thought, oh, that's really terrible. They're really miserable. We're all happy we're going to heaven when they were religious, you know, when they thought Jesus would make sure of it, even no matter how they behaved. Sensitive person, after suffering a lot in life, is quite happy to just extinguish the whole thing. But not Americans, not us, because we're in a culture where extinction is just a matter of dying. So it's really quite easy. Just like the final going to sleep, okay? Or the real quick one, kaboom, you know? Then you become the nothing that you really are, according to the authorities of our culture, right? I mean, that's not controversial. Does anybody disagree? That's what our culture presents things. So we only have to worry about this life. So, you know, even sensitive, if we have some fun, well, we're okay here, you know. But Buddhists also not just Buddhists, many cultures where people are more practical and realistic than we have become, our Western culture since the Enlightenment. Since we recoiled in fear from the domination of the church, for which I congratulate us, of course. But in recoiling, we went so far that we hid behind the shield of nothingness, which is a non-shield. So we're in a state of another version of a state of delusion. Instead of hiding behind Jesus, that he's going to take us to heaven or some other savior, Krishna, somebody in some other thing, we're hiding behind the shield of we don't exist. And that will be revealed to us simply by dying, that we don't really exist. We don't exist at all, actually, not just really, but don't exist at all, right? So the Buddha taught the Mahayana even in the Pali texts 100%. But he didn't press people so much. For example, they asked him, how come you were such a great Buddha? Shariputra once asked him. Buddha asked Shariputra, he says, how come you can't figure out what my ethics are? And Shariputra said, I can't imagine what your ethics are, Shariputra. Why? Shariputra is the high saint, you know, the foremost disciple who attained nirvana in the arhat, you know, individual vehicle or fundamental vehicle way, and therefore he already attained it. He's a great meditator and wise person, and he attained it, and he's just like running on momentum, and the minute he dies, he's extinct, because he attained extinction already, in other words. There's two kinds of extinction for those dualistic Buddhists: the extinction with remainder and the extinction without remainder. That's what they call it. And with remainder means then the body of the person who attained that nirvana and became extinct, but still are running around on momentum. And I remember reading years ago in a Sri Lankan little pamphlet, it's like when you turn off a ceiling fan, You know, they have them in Sri Lanka and Asia. You know? And then it still whirls for a while. You know, there's no more electric current, but it whirls for a while, and then it stops, right, when it runs out of momentum. So that kind of person who's attained nirvana, they're just passing time, because they're already extinct. So Buddha then says, well, actually, the reason I am the way I am, and then he tells hundreds of, or if not thousands, of previous life stories where he was, and he calls himself, I was the Bodhisattva at that time. That's the cardinal thing of the Mahayana, the universal vehicle, is you have to be a Bodhisattva, where you're going to save all beings, yourself. And Nagarjuna is telling this to the king, too. You have to, you know, kings kind of have idea of being identifying with their citizens, a good king. And so he's telling their king, you know, you have to deal with all beings. When you can't attain nirvana until everybody does. So you have to bring everybody with you, which the normal escapist person, spiritual person, cannot conceive of that. Totally. In the beginning of the Vimalakirti Sutra, these young men and women from yuppies come from this wealthy city of Vaishali, where he lives, to where the Buddha is in the grove of Amrapali. And they say, listen, they praise Buddha, first of all. He makes a miracle, does a piece of performance art for them. They give him some offerings, and then they respect him and praise him. And then they say, listen, we know about trying to be Buddha. We want to be Buddhahood. We want nirvana, we want Buddhahood. We're going to be Buddhas. But please tell us, what is this thing about making the Buddha land? Making the Buddha verse, the Buddha field, meaning make the whole place Buddhahood. All the people, the whole universe. What is that? We can't quite get that one. Right? And then Buddha gives them a big spiel. Then Sariputta says, how can that be? You know, this is not a Buddha land. And then the Buddha shows him that it is the Buddha land. He's in the perfect place for himself to maximize his approach to actual Buddhahood, which he doesn't even imagine can exist. Sariputta, until he hears the teaching, then he kind of begins to get it. But the Prasangikas, so there's no difference between individual vehicle and universal vehicle. If you're going to save all beings, every single one has to get saved. So it is an individual vehicle, right? But to save themselves, the individual, when they really learn the nature of things, and they realize that they're totally entangled with us. Poor Shakyamuni. He was entangled with every single citizen of New York, including Dhaka registrants and migrants and beggars and everybody. Even thousands of years later, he was entangled with all of them from beginningless time. So until they're free, he's not free. And then which then makes a mystery. How did we say he became a Buddha? And I'm not going to get that right now. But what I'm saying is, according to, Nagarjuna, a lot of this is talking about some people even in India in his time are acting like Buddha didn't teach the Mahayana, and modern scholars totally say that. They say that's a whole new thing, everybody made it up, and they don't respect Asian people, and so they think, well, they're just lying, saying Buddha taught it, because that makes them feel good. And even they're so irrational, their theory, they say the monks were becoming very unpopular about 500 years after Buddha's time, 400 or 500 years after his time. Nobody liked the monks anymore. And so they saw that they were liking all the bhakti Hindu gods who were coming to save you, you know, Krishna dancing with you and Shiva being a yogi with you and all this. And so to compete with them, the Buddhist monks invented the Mahayana and pretended Buddha taught it. That's what the Westerners say. It's that rude. Okay? I've been dealing with them. Meanwhile, those Pali texts that they think are the original, they call early Buddhism, they were not written down, a single one of them, for 700 years. They were all kept in memory, although the Indians had awesome memories, by the monks, you know. And somebody else kept the Mahayana texts, actually, because they were actually written down according to their own history of themselves. And they were, I personally think they were written down by the merchant classes, who were the ones who did writing. The Brahmins were against writing. because they didn't want anybody else to read their Vedas. They had them all memorized. And with extraordinary, there's been a neuroscientific study of Brahmin, Vedic Brahmin, who still today who do Vedic rituals, and they have hippocampuses, like London taxi drivers, who have memorized all the little alleys and streets of London. They have a huge hippocampus memory. And Vedic chanters have the same kind of thing, but they're not driving taxis. They're driving rituals to make the gods behave, you know. That's what they do. So they didn't want to write anything down, so all those Pali things actually were not written down. Whereas the merchants who had to write, they had to keep records, you know, income, outcome, whatever, expenditure, they wrote everything down. So they likely kept these Mahayana texts. And Buddha asked them not to widely disseminate them for 4 centuries, he said. I don't want them widely spread. Because non-duality has one danger. Your oppressive monarch can say, well, it's all one, and you know, it's all non-dual, so I can just step on you, or conquer the other country, and it's all nirvana anyway, so who cares? You know what I'm saying? They can legitimize all kind of negative behavior and negative attitudes on the basis that it's all one. Okay? So they weren't ready for that, because they would have fit that into their old caste system, what we call, in philosophical studies, we call it monism. Non-dualism is not monism, because non-dualism means that even the duality is one thing. So therefore the one thing supports the duality. So therefore, you know, one and many, you can't settle on either one and many. You have to encompass oneness and manyness, both. Do you follow? Like you do. Don't say that's impossible. Right now, I have 10 fingers, but they're all part of my one body. I can't really wiggle them all simultaneously. Well, sometimes I can, but I can't think about them. I think about them separately, right? But they're really all one, because they're one body, one nervous system, right? So there are many ways in which we encompass these supposedly paradoxical things. So therefore, the Mahayana is Buddha's teaching. He gives a great thing about that. And because the Buddha simultaneously taught all of that, then of course they really freak out when we say that the Vajrayana he also taught, of course. And he taught that before beaming down. Mandala is just Starship Enterprise in the Buddhist view. It's like Starship Enterprise. You know, in the Great Samaja Mandala, the different 32 deities in the usual version of that, every single one of them, like one of them is Shariputra, one of them is Buddha, one of them is Buddha's wife, one of them is Buddha's mother, one of them is the father, the king. All of the characters in the Buddha's play, the Buddha legend, the Buddha story, are all descended Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who emanated into this tableau and worked out in history this story of a prince who became an enlightened person and dropped out and blah, 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 to inspire the planet, you know. It's the way in which the mandala spaceship breaks the prime directive and interferes with the evolution of the society on the planet by planting people who then set a higher example for people. It's truly sci-fi. And someone like Vimalakirti is really Doctor Who, in case you know who Doctor Who is. If you don't know who Doctor Who is, that's homework to go watch Doctor Who. But unfortunately, try to find it on Netflix or something, because BBC has too many commercials in America. So irritating to watch with the long commercials. So is there any difference? Somebody wonders, is there any difference between practitioners? I'm on this page. Can you read it above me? Of the universe. Oh, I always want to go up, but it's not like that. Oh, no. Very unstable. Between practitioners of the universal vehicle and those of the fundamental vehicle, since both have to realize emptiness to attain awakening. But only the Prasangika, what I call dialecticist centrist, you know, the highest, what the Tibetans, Sinsonghab, I think is the highest form of the centrist school, only they think that the arhats from the individual vehicle have attained full enlightenment in a way, that their nirvana is the full thing, but they just haven't developed the body side, the compassion side, but they will inevitably do that. And they're the only ones who say that. The mind-only people and other kinds of centrists, they say, no, they have a lesser enlightenment. They think it's full enlightenment, but it isn't. But the highest one doesn't agree with that. So when they train in wisdom, when they educate themselves in wisdom, as I would prefer to say, I don't like training in wisdom. When they educate themselves in wisdom, Bodhisattva's meditation on emptiness has to be supported by, oh no, I can't do it that way. Has to be supported by the vast method side of compassion, bodhicitta, right, which is the Bodhisattva vow that I will be a Buddha for the sake of all beings and bring all beings into freedom with me. Unshakable resolve and dedication. The fundamental vehicle's teachings do not say that the practice of disciples and hermit Buddhas must be supported in this way. Following the Bodhisattva path requires not only gaining the realization of subtle emptiness, but also the firm aspiration to attain full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings, and the collection of merits supported by bodhicitta, which should be, at least they put it CH, I'm so proud of it. It should be spirit of enlightenment. So he makes them, he shows where they're the same and where they might be different. And then he goes here, and I'm going to skip now. And he has a whole thing about how you should really deal with the Mahayana. And he's pumping the king up for some serious heavy-duty teaching that he's coming up with. After he taught all that great stuff about you should be delighted with this impossible task of saving all beings. You should be delighted about it. Discouraged by its vastness and profundity, ignorant persons, due to their confusion, today deride the universal vehicle. Oh, sure, they're going to save all beings. And thus become the foes of themselves and others. So they become their own worst enemy and deprive themselves of the bliss of full awakening. He puts it really well. To be attracted to the universal vehicle in this life requires having an instinct from studying and or practicing it in previous lives. Those who lack such instincts misunderstand and criticize it. In doing so, they abandon the universal vehicle and the causes for peerless awakening, putting the chance to attain peerless awakening far away, and they deprive themselves of universal bliss. So, here he goes in this. I don't really want to do this more in detail, though, because in a way this is a little bit easy for people who are trying to really deal with it. But here is that thing. I said, just the ethical conduct of the Buddha was beyond Shariputra's ken. Why then wouldn't one accept that the greatness of the Buddhas is inconceivable? And the non-arising taught in the universal vehicle and the extinction taught for other Buddhas, that's individual vehicle Buddhas, are both emptiness. Therefore, one should accept that extinction and non-arising are ultimately the same. Emptiness is the majesty of the awakened one. Reflecting thus with reasoning, how could the wise not maintain that what is said in the universal vehicle and the other vehicle are equal? That's very good. He gives a very good explanation of that. This is we don't need to deal with this. But I wish I could, but we just don't have time. But as I said, the key to becoming a bodhisattva, which anyone can do, is it only becomes logical when you have conquered within your mind the subliminal feeling that this is your only life and you don't have to worry about the future one. And also as well, any kind of feeling you may have in association with any form of theistic religion that someone else is going to save everybody. Even you have a future life, yes, but then you don't have to really yourself do it because someone else is going to do it. Either Jesus or Krishna or Shiva or somebody. So you have, that's those two things that mean that you're all what you do only ripens you in this life, and then for theistic thing in just one life beyond this by the help of someone else. Those two views you have to overcome, where you have faced the somewhat intimidating prospect, and you begin to feel viscerally that that is the case, that you have an endless field of play before you, in interaction, endless numbers of other people who are really all your dearest relative, really, and have been many times. They may be strangers now, but they are really long-term your dearest relative. So you really have a motive to want to identify with them. So when you when that begins to creep up on you, overcoming our timidity about such a vista, it's frightening, actually. Really, we're frightened, like, what's going to happen to me when I'm 90, or 80, or even if I get there, And imagine what's going to happen to me when I go through death and rebirth, death and rebirth. And death is definitely, by definition, where you lose all control. And if you don't know how to surf the situation of losing all control, if you don't have the generosity of letting yourself go and trusting in the loving energy of the universe, then you should be nervous, But it's only when you have that sense that, okay, what I do now is part of a causal web that goes on forever. And it doesn't mean there isn't an optimal way of being relating to that causal web, which is Buddhahood. And given infinite time, why couldn't you reach the optimal way if there is one? And then they can help you think that through, how there is one. And when we do that, then then it becomes sensible. Okay, yes, I might as well drag everybody else along with me, since they're going to be dragging on me anyway. You follow? Okay, I don't want that one. And this is this one I did tell you in an earlier thing, but it's really beautiful. A language teacher will make some students, this is to be underlined, these verses. Read from a diagram of the alphabet. That's where you start, you learn the alphabet. Likewise, the Buddha taught the Dharma in accord with his disciples' abilities. The Dharma he taught to some is for the purpose of stopping negativity. To some it is aimed at the practice of virtue. And to some he taught one that is based on duality. So this means stopping negativity and the practice of virtue. These are lay people, and the practice of virtue is the first type of novice monk. And also the duality is definitely the bhikshu, the mendicant, and actually this verse includes the lay people and the monk and nun, the bhikshu and bhikshuni, the male and female mendicants, because they become monks not because they're freaked out about having a household, but because they're freaked out about the evolutionary situation and they want to be professional, full-time commandos, special ops people dealing with their own inner enemy of ignorance, hatred, and delusion. And the order of mendicants in a society wealthy enough and generous enough to support it is the way of having not to earn a livelihood and to depend on sustenance from others while developing yourself as your one job in life. So it's a really lucky thing. It's considered a super privileged thing. It's not at all thought of some self-deprivation or something like that. And the word which we translate in English when we talk about Buddhist monks and nuns, even monk and nun is wrong. They're mendicants. They're not monks and nuns. They're mendicant, male and female mendicants. That means living on alms and being supported by the society. And when they become a full-fledged monk or nun, mendicant, male or female mendicant, they graduate, it's called. So they enter another world, actually. A world that lives above the level of the lay people who only have a little time for self-development and have to make a livelihood and take care of people and do things, etc. Which doesn't mean that that's utterly inferior by any means. It just means they don't have as much time and energy and effort to put into self-transformation and ultimately other transformation. So the monk thing, the mendicant thing is a natural and normal and really important thing. And particularly in Buddha's time, and for example, in our time, it's massively important. People who like Buddhism in America, they all think, oh, American Buddhism, no, we're not going to have a bunch of monks like they had over there in Sri Lanka and Thailand and blah, blah, and Tibet. We're not going to do that. We're all going to get married, and we're going to do our Dharma practice in the household, you know. Well, that's all great, but the point is, that's the Protestant ethic, actually. The Protestants are not going to go to some monastery and do illuminated manuscripts and be Hildegard of Bingen or Teresa of Avila or John of the Cross. No way, they are parasites on the hard-working Protestants who are working for a living, you know. No work, no food, you know, and so that's why we don't respect them, actually. And even Catholics have a hard time manning or womaning their monasteries, although they have more luck with the females because they're smarter. So they're happy to run away from the oppressive family in which they do all the work. So there's lots more nuns. But the male monks, there's Thomas Merton and then a few people making jam and watching TV in between Vespers. And then they rent one part of their 20,000-acre monastery to the Buddhists. It's funny. But anyway, he taught to some a dharma not based on duality, that's the Mahayana. And then finally to the upper level of the Mahayana, he taught he taught a profound dharma, the Gambhira teaching, the profound, terrifying to the timid. Emptiness, this is a wrong translation, not wisdom, emptiness. I'm sorry, this is wrong. Oh, I can't do it, it's a book. It's a mistranslation. Yeah, of course, wisdom knows emptiness, but what it says in the verse is emptiness. It's my favorite phrase, shunyata karuna garbham. Emptiness, the womb of wisdom, which I think is the right translation of it. But you could say its essence is emptiness and compassion. It doesn't say wisdom and compassion, it's emptiness and compassion. Because it's referring to the reality, not the knower of reality, but the reality itself. And it is the means, which means relativity, of course. And it is the means to attain full awakening. So these three verses are something to remember. Okay. So, and he has, his commentary on it is wonderful how he goes through all the levels of the different Buddhist, what they call philosophical views or theories, because all theories as far as Buddhist science goes are hypotheses. None of them completely captures the nature of reality, and therefore the best one is the one that is most open to that, which is called the dialecticist centrist, who sometimes say we don't have a view, but their not having a view is a view, of course. They then will admit that, because it's wrong to say, it's nihilistic to say we don't have any view, because you do have a view, you have a point of view. But their point of view is that there is no definitive point of view, finally, except that. The view that there's no definitive one is the only definitive one, right? Which means open-mindedness is the view, you know? And the most open-minded possible way you can be is the view. Pure negation, in other words, that is, right? Emptiness, which then leaves you with the illusory, magical, magnificent, infinite relativity. Since there's no place outside the relativity. The four formless realms, deep samadhis, disappearing hideouts of the spiritual person are not nirvana. They're not Buddhahood. They're just a relative state that seems like an absolute to the ill-educated person who doesn't have who is not knowledgeable about the inference of the royal reason of relativity. Because they experience it, it's relative. Because they're a relative being. Even then, it's a kind of experience that seems like you and it become absolute. You know it isn't the case simultaneously. So it doesn't destroy the world, actually, the relative world. It just helps you get away from suffering and take others away from through bliss, through the bliss of that release. But that release becomes contained in responsible, artful interactivity. is the key thing. That which is Buddhahood, not some aloofness. Buddha is not aloof at all, poor guy. Buddha's you and me. Buddha's all of us. It's forced to be. If you perceive yourself as everything, with all of the people in it, then you're perceiving yourself as each one of them. Right? But luckily for them, you see them and their deeper nature where they are bliss. They're made of bliss. Their cells are bliss. There's a bliss energy below the wave-particle paradox, definable level. There's a bliss energy that we're really made of. It's also, it's like light, but it's beyond light actually, because it's light and dark. You know, remember dark matter and dark energy? It's a combination of light and dark. Clear light means it's a gray. It's a gray translucency. So you see them like that, but you don't ignore seeing them. You're not aloof from seeing them just as they see themselves. And if they're not enlightened, they're not satisfied, and they're anxious, and they're frightened, and they're vulnerable, and they're sensitive, and they're worried, and they want to find a way out. So then that becomes your automatic preoccupation. Right? I mean, we've been around that. So then he says, through faith in the universal vehicle and the practices stated therein, one will attain unexcelled awakening, that's Buddhahood, and all kinds of joy along the way. I prefer enlightenment to awakening because I love Steven Pinker. I love the materialists, don't get me wrong, but they have a wrong idea. Their idea is limited, but as limited as it is, I love it. Enlightenment now, he uses enlightenment. The 18th century enlightenment is part of Buddha's enlightenment. He just reached there 23 centuries earlier, that's all. And he had something more than just being afraid of the church. He had something more. He has an inner knowledge as well as an outer knowledge. Not just observing. You know, they started with their enlightenment by taking God away from the church and saying that God's book was nature and that their material nature, and they would just look at that, and that way they would know the mind of God because He created the nature. So really, what that really was a kind of sneaky pantheism, panentheistic heresy of theirs, mixed with a dose of palliative nihilism. Panentheism is the only sensible thing. The church just tells you, no, this universe is not God. You're not God. You're a sinner. You know, God created you, but He's not you. Nonsense. What did He create everything out of? Himself. Then everything is Him. Then Buddhists are cool with that. We're all God. If they would say that, we wouldn't mind. But they don't like that. They get absolute otherness of God. They go on like that. If something was absolutely other, it would be absolutely irrelevant. If it wants to reach over and relate, to do something, then it's not absolute. Okay. So then the teaching, I don't know why they don't need the word. Okay, oh yeah, this he says. There's the teaching, in essence, compassion, consisting of generosity, ethical conduct, and patience. Really, I don't think this translation of hers, fortitude, works. Or John's, whoever did it. It's a nice try because, you know, remember I've told you about how I get all worried and I never can settle on tolerance or patience. So they're doing fortitude, and it was bearing injury bravely, you know. But it's more than that. It's non-anger. So it has to be patience or tolerance. And fortitude is not. Fortitude is more like the next one, energy, effort, you know. Virya, paramita, you know. Anyway, it was taught especially for householders. You should resolutely internalize it, okay? So then that's the end of that set. And then here is the most amazing statement. He says to his disciple, the king, he says, if you are unable to rule in accord with the teaching, because the world tends to be opposed to the teaching, then for the sake of the teaching and glory, glory being your own Buddhahood, it makes sense for you to become a monastic. So here, and by that means a renunciant, you know, she's using a Western word, because she thinks of herself as a non-mendicant, but really to become a mendicant is what should say, not because monastic then brings all the Christian monastic connotations with it, which are not necessarily appropriate. Anyway, because sentient beings are unruly. Anyway, so that's really amazing, because the height of collectivism, is where the heavy lies the head that wears the crown and all this kind of thing. The king is the one servant of all the people, so the king cannot drop out. Has to be there, has to be in charge. In the authoritarian societies, which the whole planet is afflicted with, not just Western. And so, but here he's saying, yeah, you're doing great stuff as a king, and I really like you because you're doing all the good things I'm urging you to do. My Bernie Sanders advice about this Buddhist socialism you're following, which is great. And you're supporting all the schools and making education the purpose of the society, which is the Buddhist thing, which is great. And you're not doing capital punishment on prisoners, which is great. And even you're going to help people out of the prisons. That's amazing. Did you read the thing about the prisons, all of you? Did you read that and doing homework for this? With the thing I asked you to look at? Anybody? No? It's amazing. 2nd century of the Common Era, maybe, or maybe 1st century. He's going on and on about how the king should go and check out the prisoners and learn their life stories and why did they go wrong, and try to rehabilitate them, think of them as his children, don't execute even murderers, the very worst uncontrollable person, exile or banish them, etc. You have to protect others, of course, and they should be punished in a way, but the punishment should be a rehabilitative, educational thing, not just revengeful thing. It's amazing. Yeah. I thought I was going to cover that, but maybe it was earlier. But anyway, that's okay. There's only a limited time. It's it's really breathtaking, and I agree with that. The problem with capital punishment in a society is, it doesn't deter people really, because people who kill are just as ready, more or less, if they had the different kind of emotion, to kill themselves. So they kind of. Like how many of those people go and shoot people and then shoot themselves, So it doesn't really deter, A. And B, it encourages killing, because it says if you're righteous and if you have the power and you have the police and you have the courts and you're the society, then it's fine to kill. It's even the right thing to do. So then other people have their rationalizations about why so-and-so who they want revenge against has no right to live and therefore I should kill. So the subliminal message you're sending is the opposite of what you want to send. Because what you want to send people is don't kill people, because it's bad for the killer, as well as, not to mention the murderee. The murderer and the murderee, it's bad for both of them. And therefore don't do it. So then he starts in with the king as a monastic, as a renunciant, as a mendicant. You should first become serious about your education. I'm so tired of this training word. Focusing on the pratimoksha, that means individual liberation. And it's a list of rules and resolutions that the mendicant, non-mendicant or monk mendicant, that they read every fortnight. They recite together every fortnight, and then they confess any rule that they've broken. And some of them are just more like etiquette rules. Like there's 18 different rules against slurping, for example. These are onomatopoetic poetic words, and therefore you confess, well, I did go blah, 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 blah. There's like 18 words like that. And that's because in communities, when they go back to have their lunch under the tree or in their monastery later, like residents, then they're all very sensitive because they've been meditating and thinking and so on, and then some guy's slobbering there, and it's really disturbing to everybody else. Have to control their irritation, like this. So then you confess, I'm sorry I slobbered, And then the only 4 things is killing a person, any kind of sexual practice, stealing, and taking what is not given to you, and or pretending about your state of enlightenment or awareness. Showing off and pretending that you're more enlightened than you are. That kind of lying, in other words. Those are the 4 things. Then there's no professing that, then they kick you out. Although not always. I told you the story about no, I won't. I don't have time. So serious about it, and the vinaya means the discipline. it's mostly focused on the monk and nun mendicants, but also it has precepts for the lay people also. And also on becoming learned. Oh, gee whiz, that's great, learned. Then why are they just being trained? They're becoming learned because they're being educated, darn it. And determining the meaning of what you study. That's an educational process. Then you should eliminate those faults that are cited in the Chudra Vastuka, which is, there's a version of that in the Pali, Kudaka it's called, and so on. Assiduously learn to recognize them, and widely known to be 57 in number. And so these are these very subtle things in the mind, which there's a long list of, and I won't do them in great detail, except to say, it starts with wrath, what he calls wrath, really usually anger. People would simply write anger. But okay, wrath, for some reason he wants to put that. And then rancor is a kind of bitter malice, concealment, and hostility, which I don't think is a good translation. In other words, these lists of 57 mental postures, you could say, are notoriously difficult to translate and to figure out really exactly how they overlap with each other, different kinds of anger, different kinds of lust and greed and miserliness and all these, how to distribute the English words the way that the Sanskrit or Pali words originally or Tibetan words is nobody's really settled it yet, But therefore the next bunch of verses, dissimulation, pretension, jealousy, miserliness, he gives, that's another 4. And he gives a commentary of each of them from traditional sources. And, but then about the English translation, as I said, is still not settled. If you read these verses, which I hope you have been doing, I feel that in talking to the king, what he's doing is, then there's a great thing about how many different kinds of pride there are. I don't know if you noticed those verses, they're really fun. One of the first type of pride is, the first is called pride. It is where one thinks of oneself as even inferior to the inferior. So you can have a pride of being the lowest. Like I'm the worst possible, that's a kind of false pride. They say, I'm the worst of the worst. Equal to the equal or greater than or equal to the inferior. So, it's 3 branches. We are inferior to, I'm the worst of the worst. Actually, an exaggerated sense of self and a perverse pride, because we think we are somehow special because we are the worst. So, some person can really get into that. It's a kind of pride, And I think that's fun. I think in other translations they call it the pride of humility. Of a kind of obnoxious Uriah Heep type of humility, like I'm so humble, like I'm more humble than you, You run into people like that. And then there's presumptive pride, and then there's pride beyond pridefulness. Then we can see that kind. Here nowadays we can really see that. And then the 5 empty aggregates. But you know what the aggregates, does everybody know the aggregates? Or I could call them body-mind processes. Does everybody know that? Yes? No? Who, hands up. How many people know what are the 5 aggregates? Only 3 or 4 people. Well, the thing about the 5 aggregates is that it's considered... I don't want to rob the flowers. Your material processes of your body, right? Then your sensations of pleasure, pain, and numbness, which people wrongly usually translate as feelings, which we in English can be a sensation of pleasure and pain, but usually it's an emotion. But these are just feelings, pleasure, pain, both physical and mental, and numbness, 6 types. Neutral, mental pleasure, neither pleasure nor pain. Neutral, physical, neither pleasure nor pain. Then physical pleasure, and physical pain, mental pain. And that's what second aggregate it's called. And that's that's the first mental one. And it's like, you have your body because you have feeling. You have sensations in your body. Like right now, my foot feels comfortable. It's not pinched in a shoe. But lots of parts of my body, like my back or something, I'm not thinking about, so it's sort of numb to me. And mentally, I'm happy that I don't have any particular agony. at the moment. So I have a mental pleasure at that, etc. So that's the next level. It's where mind connects to the body by sensations of having the body or being the body, okay? Then the next one are concepts, recognition, where you know things as fitting with your concepts and images, and they fit on the things. And so then, okay, I know that's a pillow, this is the floor, that's people, this is whatever. And that's a kind of a whole process. And then there's your emotional reactions to those concepts and sensations, and also your deeper things like your deep sense of up and down, of direction, of the passage of time. You know, we have these deep inner clocks and things, you know, in our mind. All of those things are called mental functions or mental creations. And that's a big aggregate of things, actually, a big set of processes. And then there's the processes of consciousness. So I think you have to meditate on this right now. I want everyone to know what this is, because so many things are related to this. So meditate for a minute. Go into meditative mode. That is to say, think internally. Inventory yourself internally. And when you inventory yourself internally, you can mentally schematize your body-mind self in these 5 levels. This will be considered very useful for you in the Buddhist practices and therapies and meditations and studies. And so first you scan all your physical processes. And meditatively you kind of start with the tips of your toes and the soles of your feet, and you go right up to the crown of your head. And you know, you inventory your blood circulation, your heart pumping, your lymphatic flow, your neural, electrical kind of electromagnetic neural energies buzzing up and down your nervous system. You know, your breathing in and out. You know, all of these things having to do with the physical body, matter. They often translate this as form, but it isn't really, that's not a good translation. It should be really matter, the material aggregate, or physical aggregate, okay? Then, as you mentally scan around over your body, you automatically, like right now, if I become aware of my knee, I sort of focus on a sensation I might have of the cloth of my pants on my knee, what that feels like on the skin, or the posture of the knee, you know, depending on how I'm sitting, and whether there's a little stress in the way I'm sitting, you know, because we move around a lot, because once we hold any position for a period of time, we feel a little stress in that position. And that's all of those sensations are the sensation aggregate. So it's a level of process. And it kind of sort of covers your body, and to some extent it's internal in your body too. Like you can feel your tongue on the palate, rub it, or on the teeth, the back of the teeth, you know, or you can have a pain you know, if you drank something too hot, you can have a pain on the roof of your mouth, or, you know what I mean? You can have internal feelings like that. And we could have indigestion, pain in the stomach. So inner and outer surfaces, you can kind of, and then the next level of process is your concepts. Like when I say a pain in the stomach, I have a concept of stomach, a concept of pain, which sort of wraps itself around a sensation and identifies it, and then feels its effect on me, and so on. But then it keeps organizing everything in terms of fitting with concepts for things that I have. And there's like a cloud of these concepts. And then the minute you look at any one concept in your mind, the many more rise up. Even your own thinking, you have channels of thinking in language, in different voices in your mind. You have channels of thinking of imagery, like a photo stream as we have online. And that's your conceptual, recognitional aggregate, we could call it. Recognize, meaning you know things by fitting them into patterns that you have prepared by your language and culture and experience. and you recognize them. That is to say, you put your experiences into these categories to organize what you experience, right? That's the next aggregate or process, aggregative process, and that's but more subtle, that one, right? Because it involves your thought, so on. And so then, underlying that, you have your emotional reactions to what you are recognizing and what you are sensing, and the processes of your body and around your body as well. And you have all kind of reactions to that. And they also fit in with certain things. They're happening at a certain moment. They continue in a certain way. There's all kind of deep sort of structural concepts that are deep structuring your awareness. Even connecting to things like your inner ear balance, your sense of balance, actually. You know, it is said that after Copernicus, people in public squares in European cities had riots, and they attacked people propounding the solar-centric model of the solar system, because the idea of being on a spinning ball made people feel dizzy. It disrupted these deeper structural things that made them feel happy on a flat earth. And they began to feel dizzy and nauseous and so forth. Because cultural things and concepts and deeper structural things in the mind, as Kant in Western thought discovered, and Buddha discovered a bit earlier in Indian thought, they're very profound. They totally shape our experience. So then that's the fourth level, more deeper still. And then the final level is our consciousness itself, which at first we think of as a unitary thing, but then we start looking at it analytically and experientially. You are meditating, so you're looking experientially, analytically, and you realize that if your eyes are closed, you're not having any visual consciousnesses. So your visual consciousness is not aligned with your visual nerves and your visual field at the moment if your eyes are closed, except for maybe the lid of your eyelids, some reddish, pinkish glow in your eyelids. But you are hearing, so your audio consciousness is focused on your audio nerves and then interpreting and hearing the waves of sound that are coming from me speaking. And you know, if there was today we don't have sirens in the street, but you know, you have a hearing field around you. Then closer to home you have a smell field, olfactory, and then you have a taste field from when you had a snack for dinner, and still some aftertaste or saliva in your mouth and so forth, your tongue sense, and you have that consciousness. And then you have a tactile field where your consciousness is zooming around, attending to your sensations of the surfaces of your body. So that's 5 different types of consciousness, and you realize that they all are very changeable, just as when you look around, you see different things. So the consciousness that registers these things is also looking around, and you're hearing different things, so that is changing with what you're hearing, etc. So you realize your consciousness is a very fragmented process, actually. And then inside all of them, the 6th consciousness, they say, is the mental consciousness. And that one goes around and aligns itself with one of the 5 consciousnesses very often, which is why when you're deeply engrossed in looking at something, you sometimes won't hear somebody speaking to you. You're deeply floating away in music. You sometimes won't see someone in front of you, etc. In other words, you can become the mental consciousness, when it completely aligns with one of the 5 sense consciousnesses, it ignores the other ones. You know, it moves around. And then also it can have its own inner field of imaginative vision, the inner theater of imaginative experience, where you can have fantasies and memories, and you have environments in there, and sort of like your dream, like the one that's almost like the consciousness that goes into a dream. You know, it's like an inner consciousness. That's the 6th one. And it also is changing with all the thoughts in your mind, with the emotions in your mind, with the sensations in your mind, and with the phenomena that occur materially or physically with your body. So these are the 5 levels. It's a schematization that you use analytically in meditation to become more self-aware of what your actual realistic life process actually is. And of course, this is really critical in the most important thing that you do with Buddhist learning and Buddhist critical thinking and Buddhist meditating, which is you are looking to verify the nature of how you identify yourself. So this is sort of the blueprint of your body-mind house, you could say. Although actually the more complex blueprints, interestingly, include the field of your sense objects, like what you see, what you hear, what you smell, taste, touch. Just farthest away and closest, and then touch is direct contact. But the objects are also part of your mind in a way, in the Buddhist view, because they occupy your consciousness, and your consciousness reflecting them, and they go out and they also recognize them, and they discriminate between the object you pick out in the background, and et cetera, et cetera. Not to mention the more subtle levels where, virtual photons bounce over surfaces and come to your optic nerve and then are organized in your perception by fitting them with a concept that you draw out of your own memory. It's a really complicated thing. And you really, if you even just meditate your 5 aggregates without necessarily looking for the self right away, you realize you are a buzzing, what William James called a buzzing, blooming confusion. When he tried to find the self, that's all he could find internally was a buzzing, blooming confusion. And he said, well, the closest thing to a self that I get is a feeling of constriction in my throat. Warmth and constriction in my throat, said William James, because he met some Hindus who showed him something about meditating, and that blew his mind. He became like he was a Harvard guy, but he became a great, and he also had a colleague who translated Buddhist texts. Okay. So then, these are all the prides. And I'm not going to dwell on these prides, these 57 different things, because hopefully you read it or you will read it, I hope. I don't see a lot of hands shooting up that everybody read it. I can't give you a grade. Anyway, but you should really try, because it's so fantastic, this book. It is really, and even some of the things that it says that are so contemporary. And why I picked this text for this year was, which I think is going to be the last year of the Trump administration, I think I picked it because it reflects all the unethicality that not just him, but all the people around him are doing, and the destructive stuff they're doing. All these mental things are all these little attitudes and mental carping and the desire to acquire things and hinting. It's praising others' possessions so that one might obtain them. This is very much a monk thing, Monks are just receive gifts from people. So they have a thing called sideways begging. So if you're the monk, and at the end of rainy season, by tradition, the lay people will come out with different cloth for monks' robes. And then you'll see a stack of cloth, unless you're the last monk in line or something, or they're running out. And then if you're a human being, as a mendicant, but you might see like number 5 down the line is the one you like. You don't like the top 4. And so then you go, no, I don't need a monk this year, the first one. And then the layman is kind of onto you, and then they go, okay, well, maybe, okay, but wouldn't you like this one? And then, no, I don't need one at all. Well, this one is, when it gets down to the one you can't, well, okay, if you insist, But then you have to confess that then every oh, I did sideways begging, I did it, I hinted that layperson, I picked out that one. And the real mendicant yogi or yogini does that. There was a famous Tibetan one called Geshe. He's very famous, and I love that guy. And he does things like, he was in a line of monks, they were doing some ritual, and then a layperson came with a huge big pot of yogurt, a nice, beautiful, like ghee yogurt, yak, rich butter yogurt. And they came in, they were putting a scoop in the bowl of each monk as it was coming down the line toward him. And then his mind started worrying, why is he making such a big scoop? That guy's a little skinny guy, doesn't need that much. He'll run out before he gets to me. His mind is all in a rage about wishing the yogurt last to reach him in the line. But then he catches himself, and he turns his bowl over when the guy comes. And the guy says, "Don't you want yogurt?" He says, "I already had enough." But that's a level, which then that's a reason for being a full-time person. You're guarding the little flickers of the mind because they're all really critical. And the more spectacular one was one where he was visiting a lay person who was a shopkeeper who had a tea shop. And then that keeper had to go out, some child or something had to step out for a minute. And then he was there and he was eyeing some tea. And he that's a really, he smelled it, it's really good. The lapsang suchang, I like that one. The tea we're having in the monastery sucks, he has a big bin of it, he wouldn't miss a little bit, And then he actually reaches over and he picks up a handful of it. And then he catches himself and he grabs his left hand with his right hand and he runs out the door saying, "Stop thief, stop thief." And then he confesses right on the spot that he was tempted by the layperson that he robbed the tea. And the layperson said, "What do you mean you robbed it?" He says, "Well, look." And he goes and shows it. "I took this much tea, The guy wants to give him, but he won't take it. Then because he already robbed. That's Geshe Bang. So this is the level. He's showing this to king, right? Because he's showing to the king, this is the hard work of what this is. It's dealing with these subtlest turns of the mind. The mindfulness thing that everybody loves so much, that's just the beginning, is to look not judgmentally like what's there in one's thinking. That's sort of looking at your conceptual aggregate and seeing what you're thinking and then how it triggers your emotional aggregate. So it's very good in that building awareness. But this is the real serious person. They get in there and they're into editing and shaping and diminishing the force of this habit and that habit. And reinforcing the positive ones, if you follow me. So there's a matter of it's like an educative process. It's an inner shaping of character, an inner shaping of habits, a deconditioning of old negative habits, and a reprogramming of new positive habits. It's very radical. And so then I go on with that. Stupefaction, I like that. It's a state of being overwhelmed that comes from not thinking clearly or from illness. Boredom is the attachment of the lazy when they're deprived of what they need to support themselves. That's depression, really, I think. Anyway, I had a lot of critiques here about but nobody ever agrees about these things. But the point is there are a lot of mental postures, basically, is what they are. Avarice, that's, unsuitable greed, lusting, fraud, pretending to does not have good. Well, one thing these translators also to say good qualities. I think the word is excellence, and the opposite of detriment or fault. What's the opposite of fault? An excellence, isn't it? In English, what's the easiest opposite of fault? You have a fault. You have a virtue or excellence. The virtue could work. Or excellence could work. All they say is good quality, because the Sanskrit word guna means good or bad quality, but then it's also used to mean the opposite of a dosha or fault. So when it's opposite of dosha or fault, I think we should just say excellence. Myself, this is one I like, but virtue is good too, I must say. Okay, so more of this. Oh, here's the one I like. Likewise, to be attached to one's country is to overstate its good qualities. So a fanatic type of patriotism, he's questioning here. 2,000 years ago, almost 2,000 years ago. The notion that and then this one, the notion that one will not die means that one is not concerned with death due to fearing it. So this is a description of denial. This is actually the denial that one, instead of saying the notion that, you could say the denial that one will die might be a better way of putting that. And then denial could become a mental posture, which it is. We all do have that. When you're taught to meditate on death, the thing you do is you meditate on how you know you're going to die. That's kind of really important. When you start doing it, you think, oh, come on, I know I'm going to die. And then what you really press on it and really think about it, and then what you realize is that you hide that fact from yourself in many ways. And it actually underlies a lot of your anxieties and fear. Sorry. Too much ice cream. Shouldn't eat ice cream. Gets my sinuses in trouble. Conceptuality in connection with recognition. And that's pretending. This is the guru disease people have. In Buddhism, we see this totally. Everybody wants to be a teacher. They go to a weekend retreat and then, okay, I'm a teacher now. What's your teacher training? I did teacher training, so I'm a teacher. Actually, you're all doing teacher training, some of you who have been here, but then you don't even want to teach, you just keep wanting to study. I know. But you're the opposite, but a lot of people, they just want to teach. Meanwhile, being a spiritual teacher is really difficult. And we shouldn't jump into it because we become responsible. And we might make the wrong teaching and you never know. And so there's really, this thing about everybody's going to be a teacher is kind of tricky. And I didn't like some of this. Affect is the transformation of body and face that occurs. What did they say it was? I said it should be, where's my note? How do you get the note? I wrote a different thing, better thing. Contortion, I put those right. Never mind that. Harmful intent, dullness, remorse, doubt. Well, I want to discuss doubt a little bit because, of course, doubt is good for a critical mind to question things and to doubt them in a systematic manner. This doubt is not really that. It's like more like anxiety, worry. You know, oh, is there really such a thing as a Buddha? Oh, is there future life? Oh, former life. And just back and forth, but not really investigating the different options. In other words. So critical doubt is a positive thing, but anxious doubt that is just vacillating is, so that's why I don't think this should be called doubt. It should be called anxiety or vacillation. Now he now finishes that to scare the king, I think. He's trying to scare the king about how imperfect our mind is. And now he comes to the Bodhisattva, which is what he really wants the king to be and do. A king obviously is. So a Bodhisattva should forsake these faults, and one who has monastic precepts must forsake them even more, since when one is freed of these faults, one can easily develop positive qualities or excellences. In short, the excellences that a Bodhisattva should develop are, or maybe fault and virtue is best. It's only 2 syllables. I like that. Virtue. Maybe this is where virtue could be used. Anyway, or generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude, which should be patience, joyous effort, meditative stability, wisdom, compassion. What's interesting is he keeps putting compassion here. This I wanted to discuss. Because compassion is not one of the 6 or 10 transcendent perfections or transcendent virtues. It is not. Wisdom moves on to what's called upaya, which they translated skillful means, which not nicely, I don't like that. Hi Duke, how are you? But I translate as art, because compassion is the mental thing. It's the overflow of bliss, or it's bliss bouncing against suffering, and your own bliss bouncing against suffering, and not being willing to tolerate that suffering, being repelled, not being shared, in other words, by the suffering being, and therefore wanting to share the bliss with that being. But then it doesn't function until it is upaya, it is art. Because when you're cheery, and we know this on an ordinary level, when you're feeling good and cheery and so forth, you're okay, you've counted your blessing, and you're dealing with a tantrum in a child or a pukey thing from a friend or a maid or a brother or a sister or aunt or whatever, then you know that it takes that, you have to artfully deal with it. If you just say you shouldn't be freaked out, then they'll get more pissed off, they'll be freaked out. You have to do some sort of a dance with the people. You have to discharge a kid in a tantrum. Like all you parents will recognize the moment at the cash register when the child is in front of the panel, huge rack of sweets, which is of course calculated to get the parent to have to buy them, or the kid makes a scene. And so, well, that's one way of being artful, but that's not artful, really, because then they'll get diabetes. So, without having to make a freak out scene at the cash register when you're trying to concentrate on your shopping, how to get the kid to calm down. Then you can distract him, you can do something else. You know, that's then art, upaya it's called. Stratagem, you know, you have to, so compassion becomes a stratagem is what I'm saying. And, okay, monastic, and then the good qualities should develop. So compassion is actually the seventh paramita, or transcendent perfection, or transcendent virtue, because upaya, art, is the seventh one. So the minute the Bodhisattva understands reality fully in the sixth stage, the stage of confrontation, then everything they do from then on is art, because that gives them bliss to understand what reality is, and then they have an art of sharing it. And he doesn't get into that, because he's not doing this system of 10 paramitas. He just says compassion is a state of mind that savors only loving kindness for all sentient beings. So that's good. And savoring it means blissfully so. And here are some fruits of that. I don't need to do this. I just love the way this Geshe talks sometimes. It's very interesting about how you understand karma, you know. The key, always, again, wisdom about selflessness is always the thing. If you understand the royal reason of relativity, and if you recognize and can find in yourself the place where you feel there is something that is always you and never changes, you won't necessarily find that place that easily, but you'll find the place where you think you're next to that place. You'll find it where you think just behind that is this unchanging you. You know, it's like I always use the concept of a family album. Have I already done that in this class? When you see a picture of yourself in a picnic 20 years ago in a family album with your relatives and kids and friends and whatever, and if you remember the situation, the time when it sort of clicks that you go back into the situation in memory is when you sort of, remember it artificially, in the sense of feeling that the way you are now, the exact observer that you are now is the observer there in that scene. When you see yourself in the picture, if you follow me, if you weren't always taking the picture, that someone else did. You know, and you sort of inhabit then yourself in the picture, right? But you know logically that you're completely different than you were 20 years ago. Like everything, you observe things in an utterly different way, you see things a different way. But that means that we feel there's some point in our consciousness that never changes. That's sort of the thing that strings together all the different changing experiences, right? We do feel that. Well, we tend to. Well, maybe you haven't found it, or maybe you're enlightened. But keep looking. There's an art to finding it, actually. That's a whole system of that. I haven't really taught that here, but I might cut to it. But I don't think so for this time. But, you know, you can find that there is that. Buddha knows that there is that in ordinary people, because he knows that, you know, when he calls the four noble truths, that's why he calls them noble truths, or noble facts. Because he knows they're not a fact for the ordinary person. That they're always suffering is not a fact to them. That they don't have a fixed self is not a fact to them. People feel they do have a fixed self. And so but it's important first to have acknowledged it, then learn the royal reason of relativity, which is just a valid inference. If anything made of, that's related to other things and made of parts, any whole that's related to its parts, you know, has there's nothing in that whole that is other than the parts. So there's no essence of the whole that is not the parts. You can dissect it completely, whatever it is. And in the old days, people might have, prior to quantum physics, people might have put up atoms as a candidate for the one thing that you can't dissect. That's the undivisible building block. That's what atom means. But now they know there's no such thing. Atoms infinitely dissolve. So Buddha figured that out earlier. So when you know that, then you do the royal reason of relativity, and then you look inside to find this real self that doesn't change. And when you do that, you go through the 5 aggregates of matter, sensation, conception, emotion, and deep structure, and deep function, and then consciousness itself, and then all the different kinds of consciousness. And then you get into a thing where you think, that you are, every time you look to find yourself as an object, that you can verify that's my unchanging self, that it slips out of your vision, because your seeking is a changing vision. But you still feel that what's driving it is an unchanging thing. You'll find that in your mind. So far, people have. I mean, it's an open question. Someone might actually find it. And what people find, actually, if they really pursue it with deep concentration, is they drop out of the whole system, and they just have a sense of space, emptiness. And then they wrongly think that's emptiness. If it is empty space, it's an empty space experience, but it is an emptiness. And you don't find it, is what they say. But whatever degree you do that, and whatever degree you erode in your own habit the self-confidence of being an unchanging self, a fixed intrinsic identity, then the more open-minded you become, and the more actually at an internal level relaxed you become. And therefore, the more adaptable and resilient you become to dealing with your situations in the world. And since Freud, modern psychologists, object, and I have all these different terms, they're much more into resilience as the healthy ego rather than the rigidity of the fixed ego identity, which was more what Freud was involved with. Okay? So then, when you perfect all the 7, you attain a sphere of inconceivable wisdom, lordship over the world, so you really master your situation when you have this. He keeps referring to it only as compassion here. Later on, he talks about the 10 perfections, which I don't like. I call them transcendences. But he talks about them later. But in this setting, he only talks about 7. But then he doesn't identify the last one, the compassion one, as a perfection. There's 6 perfections and the compassion perfection? No. Because the compassion perfection is art, or skillful means, or method, or whatever they want to call it. Because love and compassion have a method, always, of making the beloved happy, freeing the beloved from suffering. That requires art. Okay, that's very good. So then, this is amazing, this section. And the commentary on this is just amazing. And that's what I learned a lot from this, because there's a body of study in the Tibetan setting that I jump past myself. It's called Paramita study. And there's a key book and a root text and everything that the Tibetan Geshe does, which really creates a whole phenomenology of the path of development of the Bodhisattva toward Buddhahood that is remarkable. And these 10 stages, and actually they may have even converted me to calling them the 10 grounds, which I was complaining about a lot before. Remember, I was like grumbling about that. But maybe it is because then they can talk about a first grounder, a second grounder. And you can't really say a first stager, a second stager. You can't. It doesn't. And that means a person who's on that stage, a bodhisattva is on that stage, and that's really good. An 8th grounder, it's very easy once we get used to it. But it was really sticky for me, and I decided to make that change today, maybe to follow that. So the first ground, the bodhisattva directly. The first ground is called pramudita, which means the joyous. And what that is where the bodhisattva, with the bodhisattva vow, I'm doing this to become a Buddha for the sake of all beings, first has what they call a direct perception of emptiness, but I think that's a misleading translation. I would call it a direct experience of emptiness, or an overt experience of emptiness, which means that they have that sort of disappearing, release into space type of thing. And they call that an experience of emptiness. Although it isn't, although that emptiness itself is empty, so it's open-ended. It isn't like a conclusive closure thing, because it's a negation. But still, going into that space thing is good. It's like discovering the mirror surface that everything is reflected in. It's what it is. And it's very powerful. And so, at that time, the Bodhisattva can directly see the faces of 100 Buddhas, receive the blessings of those 100 Buddhas, go to 100 Buddha realms, see 100 Buddha lands or Buddha fields or Buddha verses, vibrate 100 worldly realms, live for 100 aeons, see 100 aeons into the past, 100 aeons into the future, enter into the rise from 100 different concentrations due to their great mental agility, open 100 different doors of teaching, mature, etc., goes on like that. And then so it's an amazing thing, in other words. It's so much greater than just the first kind of disappearing into emptiness of the individual vehicle practitioner who doesn't have this whole richness of the Bodhisattva world. It's really marvelous, this section. And which is around page, if you get the book, it's around page 354, toward the end, in the last 40 pages of the work. And then this thing about the 8th ground and the 9th ground, they're amazing. In my Infinite Life book, I quoted on the 7th ground. I retranslated from Sanskrit. And you definitely have like a space experience if you reach those grounds. You suddenly are you're in a big emerald wheel. And then all these other bodhisattvas come from everywhere around the universe in emerald wheels. I mean, you're in a sci-fi realm. Really amazing. It's beautiful, actually. I really like it. And here he talks about the 10 bodhisattva grounds, which go along with the 10 transcendent virtues or transcendent perfections. And he describes each one, and they're really great. And if you can be a king for many lives if you just stay on that stage, and you can be a king of many different universes at the same time eventually, like a Buddha is. I mean, it's unbelievable. So it's an incredibly magnificent and rich vision of the world of evolution and the potentials of evolution, and connects it with the desire realm heavens, actually, and then the form realm heavens, whatever the realm heavens of pure form. Like he says here, heaven of the 33, and the 4th ground is called the radiant. On this ground, bodhisattvas excel in the practice of the perfection of joyous effort. And through that, they radiate the light of pacifying wisdom, a light that is far superior to that of the 3rd ground. During meditative equipoise, 3rd grounders have a light that resembles the sunlight at dawn. But the light of the 4th grounder is far more radiant during both meditative equipoise and subsequent attainment. This is due to having a superior practice of wisdom that is adept in the subtle points of the 37 accessories of enlightenment. They call aids to awakening. The ripening result of the 4th ground is birth as a monarch in the heaven free of combat, the 3rd of the desire God realms. So, this is all in the Bodhisattva non-tantric thing, where you're going to have thousands of lifetimes until you become a Buddha, millions of lifetimes until you become a Buddha. And it was so rich. And this is what they study in Prajnaparamita, and I didn't really study that in detail. So to me, this was wonderful. I really love it. And it's just too much to deal with. 7th ground bodhisattvas are like a monarch's child as an educated and intelligent youth. Because she is close to being a monarch herself, she outshines the ministers just as 7th grounders outshine hero arhats by the power of their wisdom. And here you get the highest, in the 7th ground, you could take birth, if you wished, as a king of gods in the heaven of controlling others' emanation, of fantasies, that is. The top level of the desire realm, you're so jaded with pleasures that you don't have any fantasies. But you're a voyeur, and you enjoy everybody else's fantasies, people who are in the heavens below you. And they are, the next heaven below you is called Nirmana Rati. So that means they delight in whatever they fantasize. So they don't really need sort of coarse contact like some of the lower desire realm heavens, which are very lush, really party heavens. Although Buddha teaches there, they go there, but then when they go there, they have to send ahead some really grisly kind of like proctor to tell the bodhisattvas, the male and female gods and goddesses, to stop partying for some time and listen to the Buddha who comes to teach. You know, you need that. They don't like it. So they a little bit, there's some stories like that in the Buddhist text actually, where they scold them. You've been partying for 10,000 years. You know, you've been in that hot tub for 10,000 years. You can get out for a while and listen to the teaching. That's very fun. The Indian imagination, that's because of the greatness of the country, because of the open-mindedness, because they hosted the Buddha. And all of these people who replicated at the field of this openness of mind, they also had a much more openness to pleasure, even in the worldly level. You know, they had, I always like to say, they had their Masters and Johnson in the 3rd century of the Common Era, like 1700 years earlier than the Victorians in England. You know, they would have burned them at the stake, Masters and Johnson. You know, even in the 50s in Arkansas, they burned them at the stake. Pleasure is like scary, you know, right? It's terrifying. If people are too happy, you can't control them. Okay, so those are the grounds. You go through that. Then, cloud of Dharma is just unbelievable. It's almost like Buddhahood, and he had some interesting things. Then finally, he's 10 of renown, possessing 10 powers, and then here he comes to this sort of set of 20 verses which are like a prayer, which I wanted to read through before we finish. It's so great. The limitlessness of a Buddha's excellent qualities. And remember, this is always within the context, in this culture and in this scientific tradition, that you can be this, you're going to be this. So, and to be able to imagine it ahead of time is incredibly helpful to being inspired to make the small, incremental, you know, resiliences and transformations and self-restraints and inspirations and so forth that will lead you in that direction. And how to imagine limitless merit. They're really into building stupas. I'm definitely going to build a stupa. I visited in Boston recently, and there was a really wonderful stupa that they built there in Medford. But are there these 20? Where's the 20 verse? Oh, here. Okay, he says, therefore each day, 3 times a day, before a statue, stupa, or elsewhere, in other words, anywhere, but ideally, before, you know, like, and that's why, by the way, they make a big fuss about a Buddha image. Like, you know, they don't like it if you make a Tara who's kind of all lopsided. They want proportionality, golden mean, you know, all exactly so. Because when you look at one of these things, you're seeing yourself. You're seeing a template for what you aspire to, where your body is expressing your love for beings. Your body is not just that sort of by happenstance it's there from some genes or whatever. You've reached the stage where you are conscious at the level of the atoms and molecules and subatomic particles and pure energies inside the genes that shape them. So then your body itself is an expression of your loving wish to free beings from suffering and make them happy. And so therefore they have these canons of dimension and proportion and everything that they're very serious about, you know. And like that Tara, she's a Buddha. She's really cool. Do you know her story? She was reached almost close to Buddhahood, and then some Buddha who had been her teacher, he said, wow, you're so great. Now you can be a man and be a Buddha. And she said, to heck with that. There's plenty of those. I'm going to be a woman and be a Buddha. That's what I'm going to do. And so she did. She has like thousands of different forms, and she's amazing. In the Buddhist culture, she's sort of like the role that the Virgin Mary occupies in the Catholic culture, you know, or the Orthodox culture. But she actually is a Buddha. And so that these following verses, okay. Honoring in all ways. Can you read them yourselves? Can you read that, or is it not big enough for you? Can you read? So say it out loud. Come on, let's read it together. Honoring in all ways the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and also the Bodhisattvas. I take refuge in them, and I pay homage to those worthy of homage. I turn away from all negativity and embrace all merit. I rejoice in all the merit amassed by all sentient beings. With bowed head and palms together, I beseech all perfect Buddhas to turn the wheel of Dharma and remain as long as beings remain, That's like give teachings, that means turn the wheel of teaching. Though through the merit of doing this, and the merit I have done and will do, may all sentient beings be endowed with unsurpassed spirit of enlightenment. May all sentient beings have immaculate faculties and transcend the unfree states. May they control their own actions and live by realistic livelihood. May all embodied beings have jewels in their hands, and may a limitless amount of all kinds of necessities remain inexhaustible for as long as cyclic existence endures. That's a social system. That's a good social system. Everyone deserves it. At all times, may all women become supreme persons. May all beings be endowed with intelligence and legs. Legs means a good body. I'm afraid supreme persons, I have to double check. I'm afraid it might mean male. Because of still, that's the culture of that time, where the male has more advantages and so forth. But maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just means that it could be androgynous. Some of the deity forms are androgynous. So maybe it's not just male, but she put supreme person, which is good for her. But I'm afraid we have to acknowledge that still chauvinism, not in Nagarjuna, but in his audience. May all beings have a good complexion and also a good physique. May they be radiant and pleasant to behold, free of illness. May they be strong and live long. May they all gain expertise in skillful means and become free of all pain. I don't know why she puts dukkha here, pain. And may they be devoted to the three jewels and have the great treasure of Buddha Dharma. May they be adorned with love, compassion, joy, the ability to remain equanimous in the face of hardship, generosity, ethical conduct, patience, joyous effort, meditative stability, and wisdom. Thus adorned, may they complete all their collections, and obtaining brilliant signs and marks, may they traverse without hindrance the 10 grounds to the inconceivable. May I also be adorned with these good qualities, and all others as well. May I become free from all faults, and may I attain supreme love for all beings. May I perfect the virtues to which all beings aspire, and may I always dispel the pain of all embodied beings. In all worlds, may all beings who are feeling anxious due to fear become completely fearless merely by hearing my name. That was the prayer vow of Amitabha when he was the Bodhisattva Dharmakara, which enabled him to create the Western paradise of Sukhavati, where beings anybody who knows Amida, in the East Asia they go Namo Amida Butsu, or in China Namo Amito Pho, and that just by reciting that they can go there. That's their version of Protestantism. From seeing and thinking of me, and from merely hearing my name, may beings become clear-minded, undisturbed, and at ease. May it be definite that they will awaken, and in all their future lives, may they attain the 5 super knowledges. In all ways, may I also do what brings benefit and happiness to all beings. May I always dissuade all at once all those beings of any world who intend to engage in negativity without doing them any harm. Like the earth, water, wind, and fire, medicinal herbs, and the trees in the wilderness, may I always freely be an object of enjoyment by all beings as they wish. May I be beloved of beings. May they be more beloved to me than myself. May I bear the results of their negativity, and may they have the results of all my virtue. And people, they say that this verse is the root of that mind transformation, or what they call mind practice, lojong, that the Tibetan lamas like to teach, Dalai Lama teaches. I take all the suffering in the world on myself, and all this is the whole thing. This is Nagarjuna's statement here is said to be the root of that. And as long as there is even one sentient being somewhere who is not yet free, may I remain in the world for that being's sake, even if I have attained peerless awakening. If the merit of such statements, I think that's the end of the 20 verses, maybe. Yeah, that concludes it. That's it. And then he's commenting on that. But I just want to go back to one thing, because I do have my thing about Buddhism without Buddhism. Now, here, the first one was honoring in all ways. That wasn't maybe the first one. Yeah, that was the first one. The Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, which are called the three jewels. Buddha jewel, Dharma jewel, Sangha jewel. May I take refuge in them and pay homage to those worthy of homage. Now, my particular theory here is, which is based on the Buddhist analytical theory, that when one so-called takes refuge in those three, the real refuge is the Dharma. Because Dharma in its highest meaning means reality. And the whole reason that one gets involved with trying to try out what the Buddha's methods are is that the Buddha announced that he discovered that reality is nirvana. This is not reality. This is illusory. It's not a total non-existent thing, but it's illusory. It appears to be more substantial than it is. And we, in it and perceiving it, feel we are more substantial than we are. Or as my old Mongolian used to say, everyone is real, and we're real, but our problem is we think we're really real. So that's the way we exaggerate and get stuck in our misery, you see. And the really real thing is nirvana. And that is this. This is the really real thing, and it is already nirvana. That's the point. You can't make nirvana. It's not cause. It's beginningless. It's always been here. Ignorance has prevented us, beginningless ignorance has prevented us from knowing that. Right? That's the whole point. So my point, therefore, is that the Dharma is the reality. And then the first step down in the 11 meanings of Dharma, going down to more and more to the more restrictive kind of meanings, because it comes from the verb to hold, dir, which relates to Latin habeo, to have. And what the Dharma as reality means is that reality holds us in freedom from suffering, because nirvana holds us. So we're already okay, actually. We're assured by someone who seemed to know the reality of things. Of course, he doesn't even ask that we blindly believe that, because then that would not give us the method of getting there ourselves. So we're to question everything, in fact, actually. And otherwise we might tend to think that he's going to get us there or something like that, or someone else will make it happen for us, which we can't do. Although we're already there, you know. So, you know, no one else can remove your ignorance. They can give you reasonings, they can debate you, they can show consequences of ideas that you have that are not valid, but they can't make you understand something. You have to understand it, right? So, no one can force you to understand it. So the taking refuge in reality is what it means, actually. And of course, reality as a jewel is hard for us because we think reality has a lot of problems. But Buddha assures us, the whole of Buddhism is built on his assurance to human beings, sentient beings, to gods also. He's a big fuss about teaching human beings, but he teaches the gods also. And there's many different levels and layers of them in the Buddhist world. They're not atheistic or materialist. And they just don't believe in a creator who's all-powerful. But closest to all-powerful is a Buddha, actually, but still not all-powerful. Not omnipotent, but omnicompetent is what I like to call it. And so we're taking refuge in reality, and we're taking refuge in the one who taught and pointed out what is that reality, and we're taking refuge in the community of people who are trying to be in that reality. So therefore, in a way, that's why then that comes down to my final slogan. We're getting down to the time here, which is, in a slogan, if anybody asks you, you can say, Buddhism is realism, period. That's what it is. If you become really realistic, you will be in bliss, which is counterintuitive because of our habit that reality is full of sharp edges, you know, and disappointments and many things, and many negative things. But that's only the less real reality, luckily. That's the ignorance-based reality. The wisdom-based reality is just fine. It is nirvana. So you know, there are people who don't want to take Dharma as reality because that would be overwhelming to them, and that's probably the majority of Buddhists in history, and they have therefore not undergone the Buddhist education and have not joined the monastic mendicant orders and are lay people, but they think that they see enough amazing people from that education system who they get to like, people like the Dalai Lama and other great teachers and this Roshi and that other Lama and whatever, that other monk or whatever, or nun, and they feel they're really doing something great, so I believe in them. Then they are taking refuge in a person, and they are taking refuge in what they think of as a religious institution and a religious community. And so they are being Buddhist, in other words. But the real thing, the people who drop out to become a mendicant and put the whole universe into question because of accepting that they may be ignorant as to what it is, they are not necessarily into being Buddhist, they're into being enlightened. Okay? And that means, you are seeking reality, because that's the only way you can be enlightened. You follow? So that's why Buddhism doesn't fit in the most descriptions, modern religious studies descriptions of religion. So then he goes on, he praises that like this, and he goes on with that. And closing words of advice, there was one thing here. Oh yeah, he has a beautiful thing here about, in this same thing which I mentioned there about the Lojong, is you can connect this with your meditation where you radiate your bliss to people and you absorb their suffering yourself, and because you have the heart of open emptiness, so it just goes right through you, it doesn't burn you out. And that give and take when you exhale and inhale. It's a beautiful thing, and the commentary of this Geshe on page 381 of 394 in the ebook is utterly beautiful. How he does it, and the wonderful thing where he gives about the Geshe who taught the Lojong thought training, they call it, mind training, mind reform actually, it means mind transformation. And he has a really beautiful commentary in these pages that I recommend immensely to everyone. I did recommend at the beginning of the class, I didn't harp on it enough, so I guess a lot of you didn't get it. But it is better than the one off the net, but that's the only one I mentioned because that was free. And I can't give this away. I don't have enough copies. And this description of the give and take meditation on page 383 is really beautiful. This Geshe Tekchok, who gave it in France. And she transcribed it and published it. It's wonderful. That's the Dalai Lama's vow, He will stay in the world. He's the one. Let's have a look at this one's vow. Okay, then final advice. He says, do this, be devoted to the Dharma, just as you are devoted to yourself. Be devoted to correct practice, just as you are devoted to Dharma. That's reality. Be devoted to wisdom, just as you are devoted to correct practice. And be devoted to the wise, just as you are devoted to wisdom. So that's really good. He gives that as a simple kind of bunch of slogans. Then he talks about, last thing, he talks about the spiritual, she translated mentor. It literally means friend, actually. The guru relationship in most Buddhism is underemphasized and disemphasized on purpose. They know that it was originally India, a very patriarchal father authority type culture. And so they very much, in the teaching system in the Buddha's movement, in his community, as it spread throughout the world, they emphasized the role of what is called Kalyana Mitra. And Kalyana means virtue or auspiciousness or goodness, and Mitra means friend. So goodness friend. And that, friend is someone who gives advice, and maybe criticizes you when you're like out of line or whatever, good friend does. But, they are not an authority, really. They're a friend. They're on your level, but maybe they know something you don't, they share that with you. And that's really important. And the guru thing only comes back in the high advanced esoteric things, where it involves initiation and things like that. In the monastic orders, the abbot is not a big authority figure like in Christian monasticism. The abbot has some role. It's called upadhyaya. There's actually 3 people. But decisions about the monastic community are made by vote, and they're made by consensus. That is to say, no decision is a good decision because you don't make a decision until you have persuaded the people who disagree. So you have to make a consensus so you don't have a faction who get outvoted and create a faction, because otherwise monastic communities are very fragmentable and very factionalizable. So they have a decision system that's democratic and also consensual, so that it doesn't leave as much as possible. Obviously some people will never be persuaded, but of some things. But you're supposed to consent not to be reasonably withheld, as they say in legal documents, unreasonably withheld. So one who by his own failings has doubts about a pure, loving, and intelligent teacher, who speaks with restraint about what is helpful, ruins his chances of attaining his aims. Thinking, I am under the care of one who is pure, loving, and wise, and who states with restraint what is helpful. Vow to spiritually discipline yourself, O king. So he's telling the king to rely on a spiritual friend. She's putting mentor, she's sneaking in the guru thing with mentor. But it isn't really a mentor, except in the Tantras, the high advanced thing, where the person is also a model. It's really more a friend, a good friend, goodness friend. Okay? That's very clear. And the guru thing leads to total abuse. We've seen it already in America. It happened in Asia too. And it can be abused much too easily. And then they start telling what the good spiritual friend is like. And if someone's not like that, don't adopt them as your spiritual friend. Speak the truth, speak gently to beings, be pleasant, unassailable, skilled in public policy. Do not humiliate others, be independent, and always speak well. Be generous, dignified, with enmity well subdued. Be generous, dignified, and mentally peaceful. Do not procrastinate, do not be rash, do not be dishonest, and be courteous. Good advice to anybody, much less a king. Be auspicious like the full moon and radiant like the autumn sun. That's all of you. Be profound like the ocean and steadfast like like the planetary axis. Freed from all negativities and adorned with all good qualities. Be the sustenance of all beings and become omniscient. Right? Don't let people tell you you can't understand everything. You can understand it. You just have to work at it. The Dharma is not explained only for a king. He tells the king it is also taught as is appropriate to other beings out of the desire to benefit them. O king, it would be good for you to contemplate this discourse every day. That's what I think, that's evidence that it should be Jewel Rosary. You should turn these verses like a rosary. You take a verse as a bead, of a jewel. Each verse is a jewel, and they are. So that you and other beings will attain true, complete awakening. Be ethical and have the highest respect for spiritual mentors. Be patient, devoid of jealousy and greed. Enjoy the wealth of aiding others without expectations of return. And be helpful to those who are deprived. Don't do tax cuts that only benefit the 0.1%. Be devoted to the Supreme. Avoid those who are not. And embrace the Dharma. For the sake of awakening, this is what those who seek it should always do. Sarva Mangalam Bhavantu. That means may all people have good luck. Okay. Thank you. We reached the end. I'm sorry that, if it was proper, you'd have been assigned, you'd have a book, and you should get this book and read it. You said you read it many times. Did you read this version with the Geshe textual commentary? You did? But we don't have it in this library? We have this in the library? Well, would you request to Tashi and company, buy this book from Geshe Tekchok and from Ani Tupten Chodern and put it in sell it, okay, for the bookstore. But you guys can get it on Amazon, either eBay, and really read it, Come into a class and this and that is nice, but if you don't pursue it day by day, bit by bit, then it wears off,
This video was brought to you in part through the generous support of the Tibet House US membership community and listeners like you. To learn about the benefits of Tibet House membership, including special invites to Dorset tours with Robert, Thurman, and friends with geographic expeditions, Trips in 2018 include Bhutan. To learn more, visit bobthurman.com. Tashi Delek, and thanks for watching.